Thank you, everyone. That's a 3D printed dress from our creative industries at Griffith. It's a lovely example of some of the newer technologies that are being used in learning and teaching. As Tony mentioned, I'm the Director of Learning Technology Leadership Institute. I also direct the activities of the benchmarking activities for ACODE. And for a number of years now, we have been doing regular benchmarking activities, particularly in relation to technology-enhanced learning. So we started that in 2014. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey, what that has meant for the institutions involved. And I know a number of you in the room have been involved in this activity as well. First of all, I'd just like to take a few minutes, couple of minutes, just to talk through why we need to do quality in technology-enhanced learning. Gregor's painted a great picture for us this morning already. But there are a number of studies that we've seen over recent years that would suggest that students are looking for a level of consistency in their experience, particularly in the online experience. So notionally, a student studying 4 individual courses or units in a semester or trimester could potentially come to the online environment and experience 4 very different things. Assessment in different places, different types of ways in which teaching staff are mediating that online environment. And some of the surveys we've seen say that students would like a little bit more consistency in the way they navigate those online experiences. So, consequently, institutions have looked for ways in which they can provide some of that more consistency. Not just consistency in the online experience, of course. There's also the consistency of what we do within our blended space and our face-to-face space and how we're using technology to also bring a level of consistency to that online environment. It means, though, that institutions generally have to have some kind of framework in place to help them understand or to put the pieces in place. So often we have our policies, learning teaching policies aligned to our university policies, but not what we've seen in some of the research we've been doing is not a lot of institutions then go to the next level and put a framework around how that works out in practice. And so we'll talk a little bit about the work that ACODE has been doing in that space and some other institutions as well. And we've seen, of course, the uptake in online learning as learning management systems, of course, have become far more easy to use for our teaching staff. I started teaching online in 2001 in fully online courses, so I've been banging this drum for about 17 years now. And so there's a range of activities that happen in the online space that have evolved, and the good practice around those things have evolved over many years. But it does take a village to raise a child, and so it isn't just about us as online teachers. It's actually how we align that with our institutional activities, how we ensure there's a level of quality associated with those. So I propose that there's a hierarchy of needs in a sense, and I published this a couple of years ago now. There is a meta level of quality, which comes through at the institutional policy and procedures level. There's the kind of meso level of quality, which looks at the institutional, in this case, technology-enhanced learning frameworks. So there might be a will framework, there might be a active learning framework, other frameworks of the institution that would align back up to those institutional policies. And then, of course, there are the micro levels, the measurements and the standards that we use for online courses, and, of course, not just our online courses, but any course we might teach as well. That's the measures on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, of course, you see that there are a number of activities that would align with those particular measures. So the advent of how institutions are starting to join together to benchmark in relation to their standards and how they can then create reports that could be given to TEXA if TEXA ever wanted to report on what we're doing. Do you want to report on what we're doing?
Just occasionally.
Occasionally. And so I'm going to deal with some examples from each of these things off this framework. First thing I'd like to look at is benchmarking, because that's obviously the title of this presentation. And as Tony mentioned, there is the benchmarking note that came out in July last year. And in this note, it talks about benchmarking, review against comparators, both internal to the provider and external. It talks about the fact that benchmarking is perhaps the most elaborate form of external referencing and typically consists of focused improvements through relationships with benchmarking partner or partners. And certainly I will be putting a testament forward that would support that. Gregor mentioned that there are a number of tools, and this table is actually taken from the ICD report as well. A number of tools out there across the globe that help us do some of these things. Generally, you see there are tools that work at the institutional level, and then there are tools that work down at the course level or the unit level as well. So one of the things I'm obviously pushing the barrow for is the ACODE benchmarks, but there are also things like the e-learning maturity model, which I'll briefly talk about as well. The OLC online scorecard and toolkit. There's the European e-excellence model, and these are examples of tools that would be used at that institutional level. Of course, the ACODE benchmarks deal with 8 key components at the institutional level. There's institutional-wide policy and governance for TEL. There's planning at the institutional quality improvement. There's systems, service and support, how we support all this stuff. There's the application of technology-enhanced learning, the pedagogy. How do we design the pedagogy to go, an institutional-wide pedagogy to look at that. There's staff professional development, staff support, student training and student support. So fairly good range of measures across the tool itself. Griffith partook in the last benchmarking activity. It was held in June this year, and you see the types of levels of people who are looking at these benchmarks and making some judgments on behalf of the university, so on behalf of Griffith in this particular case. Just to give you a very, very micro view of what the benchmarks might look like. This is a benchmark out of staff professional development, which is one of the ones that Griffith did this year. And you see that there's a benchmark 5 has I think 8 or 9 performance indicators within it, and this is performance indicator 5.2. It says processes are in place and in use to identify staff development needs in support of institutional strategy for technology-enhanced learning. And so the group get together, or I make an individual judgment first, then I come together with that group of 10 or 12 people from Griffith, and we decide where we're going to place ourselves on that. And so are there no processes in place? Some processes exist. Right down to the process are in place and they are well used. And then to justify that, we need to say, okay, there's a rationale for why we do this and why we've given it this mark, and also some evidence. You need evidence. So here we do it, here's what Griffith did. Now I've got to kill you all now because this is private information. Anybody who participates in this activity signs a confidentiality agreement not to share the information from other universities. But I'm doing it for my own university, so that should be all right. Okay, so we only gave ourselves a 3 in this particular case. So some processes exist and are partly used. Okay, well, why do we say that? Well, we look at the rationale for why we said that, and we look at the evidence for why we said that. Now, we've done this activity internally, and a number of people have come together to do that activity. So then we might think, okay, we're going to expand this and ask other universities to do the same thing and participate with us in this activity. And so we do have on our ACODE site a benchmarking tool, and that benchmarking tool looks at institutional profiles, a technology snapshot, and of course the benchmarks themselves, and I'll show you a little bit of each of those. So at the just an example of institutional profile I have in here. It's probably a little bit hard to see on this, but it has the name of the institution, the unit's functionalities that deal with technology-enhanced learning, the current initiatives, the current challenges and things like that. So current challenge at the moment is the breadth of challenge includes course design for new modules of engagement at scale, finding beautifully integrated technology-enhanced solutions. We then have a tool that says what systems we're using. Okay, so we use Blackboard Learn, we're moving to Blackboard Ultra, we use Collaborate Ultra, and a range of tools, and it can tell you where we're at, what we're thinking of doing, so we're going to put that under review in the next year or so, or whatever. Now, any institution who's a member of ACODE can get to that information. I can see what Deacon's doing, I can see what RMIT's doing, and likewise they can see what they're doing. It's an openness around within the ACODE network. So I've then entered that data into the online tool for a potential benchmarking activity. It doesn't have to be associated with a formal activity, but in this case it was. And so here's how it would be represented. So on that list on the left-hand side is every institution in Australasia. So it's not just Australia, it's Australasia, so Australia, New Zealand and the South Pacific. And you'll see here that we'd given ourselves a 3 for performance indicator 5.2. And there's the rationale and evidence that we put through our internal processes now in the online tool, so other institutions can see that. And so then we come together and talk. So we started this in 2014 where we had 24 institutions from 5 countries involved. In 2016 we had 27 institutions from 5 countries involved. There you are, Tony. And we had a great time in Canberra. A very cold day in Canberra, a few days in Canberra, I'd have to say. It's about -4, -5 in the morning, but we got there. One of those 5 countries was the UK, and from the Open University in the UK. And so in 2017, they'd done it in 2014, 2016, and said, no, we want to do this ourselves. So in 2017, we also did the ACODE version in the UK, and we had 17 institutions in the UK involved in our benchmarking activities. And some of you might recognise Mark there on the left-hand side. So a few months ago, well, it's a bit more than a few months ago now, isn't it? In June, we did it all again at Griffith University at our South Bank campus. And here are the 24 Australasian institutions involved. We found that 5 countries was actually a little bit much, and we decided to bring it back down to just the ACODE member countries in Australasia, as we were getting a little bit too much other bits and pieces happening from the other countries. So we decided to bring it back to the Australasian institutions, had 24 institutions involved there. And you can see over those 3 years, to be involved in a benchmarking activity, you only have to actually do 2 benchmarks. You don't have to do all 8 benchmarks. So a number of institutions are taking a stepwise approach to that, doing 2 this year, 2 the following 2 years, and then the next 2. And so you'll see some institutions, for instance, Victoria University of Wellington down there has done all 8 benchmarks on each occasion. And so they're taking that very seriously, as has Monash College has taken it very seriously as well, and quite a few other institutions. RMIT's done a really good job very recently as well. What are they saying about it? So they do say that there's enough scope within the current suite of performance indicators to cover TEL scenarios, technology-enhanced learning scenarios, in our institutions. So that's pretty good. So 97.5% agreed and 1 wasn't sure. So which is similar to over previous years. In fact, it's gone up a little bit more because we've done some tweaking to the tool each time. And so you can see there some previous year's statistics. The ACODE benchmarks made me think twice about what we as an institution are doing in relation to technology-enhanced learning. So again, a strong agreement with that process. So 92.5% agreeing with that proposition. And the benchmark self-assessment activity has provided an opportunity to stimulate a more in-depth discussion about TEL at my institution. And so what it's done is it's brought a lot of these parties together who wouldn't normally come together in such a formal way to actually understand what they're doing in relation to technology-enhanced learning. Okay, so 90% agreed with that. Okay, I'm going to now deal with the e-learn. That's just a helicopter view of the benchmarking tool within ACODE. I'm now going to give you a bit of a helicopter view of the e-learning maturity model, which is another benchmarking type model, but it's based on capability assessment. And it's done in collaboration with the researcher, usually Stephen Marshall, who's also the president of ACODE actually. So he is the researcher in charge of the EMM model. Now 9 Australian universities have done this so far. I'd have to say 35 institutions in Australasia have done the ACODE benchmarking, but 9 in Australia have done the EMM and 7 in New Zealand. It's a very good tool. But it takes a lot of work to do it, and you get a very good result because you take a long time to do it. So the quality improvement framework that can be used for benchmarking. Institutions are provided details, they provide detailed information in relation to the e-learning capabilities, and also they need to provide good examples of practice. And that's sometimes some of the harder things to provide at that institution level is those systematic or systemic examples of good practice. And it also offers the opportunity to improve and gauge yourself over a period of time. It's not a ranking mechanism, and neither is the ACODE benchmarking activity. It's a mechanism to help you do that self-assessment and to move forward in confidence. The e-learning maturity model deals across 5 main domains: delivery, planning, framing, monitoring and optimisation. And you see again, similar to the ACODE, there are a number of performance indicators within each of those domains. And if an institution does that, they get this kind of rating. So that's the map across the Australian and New Zealand institutions. And so you can compare yourself you can compare yourself in terms of the colours. You can compare, obviously, the darker blue is the more intense or the fully adequate. And the white, of course, is either it's not present, or there's no evidence to suggest that it's present. So they've done these institutions have done this once. If they then go on to do this a second or third time, which they have in some cases, then you can start to, the model expands out and you can start to see areas of improvement or areas that you've gone backwards in. So the reddy and pinky colours are those areas that people have gone backwards in. And similarly, the green ones are those areas that those institutions have gone forward in. So that's looked at that level of institutional and interinstitutional benchmarking activity. I'm now going to look very briefly at the baseline standards for courses. Now, very recently, JCU brought out, James Cook University up in Queensland. Have we got anybody from James Cook here? Brought out some new base level standards, they call them. Now, these I thought were game changers. They brought them out probably about 8 months ago. They take a student perspective on the standards. So they say here, students will, students will, students will, students will, students will, students can. And so it's written from, it gives the educators the reason or the wherewithal to be actually able to do this for their students. It's not telling the academic staff, you will do this. And you will do this. You will put up your welcome message and everybody will see that welcome message and you'll respond within 48 hours. It's not saying that. It's saying students will experience this within your course. And it gives a little bit of latitude to our academic staff to actually make that happen in a way that they can define themselves. Similarly, we're doing a very similar thing at Griffith now. So we looked at this model because we're taking an opportunity we're rolling out Ultra, Blackboard Ultra. And we're taking an opportunity to reformulate a whole lot of our courses and programs. And so we're also implementing some new standards associated with that. And so we're doing it at what we call a foundation level, which is for every course in the university. Now, the standards we're developing are not just for e-learning, they are for learning and teaching. So foundational standards for learning and teaching. Next level up is those courses that are blended and those who would be large first-year courses we've identified as being important courses to actually put that next level of activity into, and then an optimised. So for our fully online courses that will not get any face-to-face attention and things like that, we've got an optimised level as well. So supplementing for those things that students might miss out on in the face-to-face level. That's looked at some baseline standards. There are lots of standards out there in relation to that. There's the Quality Matters, which a number of institutions use. The standards for online courses, though, is the next bit. And so here we are. We've got the OLC scorecard and toolkit. We've got the Quality Matters, which a number of institutions use. Griffith use that as well on their online courses. Got the ACODE standards for online learning environments. Got the e-learning guidelines in New Zealand. Got the JISC equality standards. We've got the European set of e-excellence standards. The e-learning quality model from Sweden. There's the Escalate TELAS model. It's evolving at the moment. And also the COL have a range of standards as well. Of course, I'm going to promote the ACODE standards for online courses, as you would expect, but there are a number of other tools out there as well. And the ACODE standards deal with course design, course shells, welcome course information. You can see what they deal with there. Next level. Okay, we're looking at institutional TEL frameworks. So we've got standards. We might have a policy. What does the framework look like underneath that? Okay, so At our last benchmarking activity at Griffith back in June, it became apparent that a number of institutions didn't have a TEL framework, a technology and learning. They had a policy, some of them did the standards, but they didn't have any framework that put the policy into action. And so we call that a framework. How are we going to build that up towards the policy or down towards the standards? So it's a framework. And so over the last 3 or 4 months, a number of institutions, so the benchmarks themselves deal at a point in time. The framework deals across time, so it gives you something to build on instead of just measuring something at a particular time. And so a number of institutions were involved in that. Who we have? University of Sydney, University of Auckland, University of Tasmania, Charles Sturt, Curtin, Murdoch, Otago, VU in Wellington, Sydney, Monash, University of Adelaide, Curtin, Canberra, and of course Griffith ourselves were involved in that. And we're right at the very beginning of piloting that. And so Griffith University, Auckland, RMIT, Canberra, ANU, USP, University of South Pacific, and Monash are starting just in the very infant stage of trialling this new framework and putting that in place. Okay, what are we going to talk about now? We're going to talk about institutional policies and procedures and that upper level framework, that thing that operationalises the learning and teaching plan down into the TEL level. In our particular case, in Griffith's case, we've done it this way. We have 8 domains of practice, and those are partnership-based learning relationship, educators, designers, learning. So we're not taking it just focusing on TEL, but you'll see there that there are learning-enabled design, digitally enabled environments. So we've actually folded that into our overall learning and teaching framework, and which aligns, of course, to our policy, and then we dive that down into the standards and have our standards associated with each of those 8 domains of practice. So not just dealing with TEL individually, or will individually, or authentic learning individually, but actually bringing those back together based on the framework. Because we've got a framework in place, we can now start to build out that framework. And so, for example, these are just hot off the press and aren't actually fully endorsed yet. So these are just an example. So the second domain is educators, designers and leaders of learning. So the potential standard for that is students are aware of the role of each member, the teaching team and students of a course learning community. Now, and then there's an example or design idea of how you might put that into practice. And that's a foundational standard. So every course in the university has to let students, they need to be aware of who's teaching the course and who else is involved in teaching the course. Pretty basic, really, isn't it? But you'd be surprised how many courses don't do it. Engaging pedagogies is one of them as well. And so students are experience the application of one or more of contemporary pedagogies, that is collaborative, active learning, authentic learning and or assessment in their course. And then there's some examples of how they might do that. And we haven't fully fleshed out all those examples yet. These are so brand new, they're not even fully endorsed. I went to the Learning and Teaching Committee yesterday and got the go ahead to go to the next level in terms of sending them out for wider consultation and things. I'll just finish with this thought. I'll just leave that for you to read. Thank you. It's not about having a tool necessarily, but the tools do give us something to action something within our institutions. Whether it's the ACODE benchmarks, whether it's the Quality Matters framework, whatever it might be, I don't care. In terms of, I'm representing ACODE, so I'm pushing that barrier, but so long as we have some things in place that we can say, okay, this is doing this bit of work, this is doing this bit of work, and this is doing that bit of work. It doesn't matter. So long as we can evidence the fact that we're actually on a journey in terms of our quality assurance. So in relation to that TEL hierarchy of needs, I would commend that to you and the thought that there are these types of activities that would happen in an institution if we're taking the quality of technology enhanced learning seriously. Thank you.
Michael, just before you go away from the podium, I mentioned in introducing you the guidance note that we produced at TEXA on technology enhanced learning. I think it was originally going to be the guidance note on online learning.
Yes.
And I think it was actually ACODE that influenced us to rename it. We've got TEL, we've got e-learning, we've got online learning. Do these names matter?
Do they matter? Well, I think e-learning itself distinctly speaks of, to my mind, e-learning speaks of online learning, where technology-enhanced learning is so much broader than that. So technology-enhanced learning also encompasses that. Yeah. Technology-enhanced learning goes so much further now. So where 10 years ago we had the divide of there was the face-to-face course and there was the online course or the blended course, that divide has started to well, there's no divide now. So many of our courses have that online component, the face-to-face courses as well. So I think it doesn't do us, it doesn't do us a good service to try and pull out one or the other. I think we actually have to think in terms of how technology is going to enable us to meet the goals that we have within our learning and teaching plan and our framework and things.
Thank you. There was a huge number of references, that particularly that list of the various frameworks that exist, which I'm sure a lot of people will want to follow up on. I look to check that we are going to be making the slides available, so that will happen. Is there maybe the ACODE website? Is that a convenient place to get links to all of these?
Absolutely. There's a number of links there already, but I can make sure that we've got a more complete list.
That would be good, because it was a long list, intimidatingly long list actually, and it would be great to have links
There's lots of information about the e-learning EMM model on there, with links out there, and a number of other frameworks as well. So, yeah.
Terrific. Okay, can we thank Michael, please?